My family ignored the urgent calls about my critical condition while celebrating my sister's gala, but what I did next made them kneel for forgiveness. My name is Natalie, and at 29, I was always the responsible one in our family. Growing up in an affluent Boston suburb with my younger sister, Amber, meant living in her shadow. No matter what I achieved, my parents only had eyes for her. I never imagined they would ignore my desperate calls as I literally bled out on an operating table. Their excuse? They were too busy attending Amber's charity gala to answer their phones. That night changed everything between us forever. In our family photo albums, there's a clear pattern. Almost every picture features Amber front and center, with me awkwardly positioned at the edge of the frame. This wasn't a coincidence but a perfect visual representation of our family dynamic. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Adams, weren't bad people, just incredibly status conscious. Dad was a successful investment banker who worked his way up from middle-class roots, while Mom came from old money, not quite enough to secure the social standing she craved. They were the type who measured success by the number of important people who attended their dinner parties. Amber was born when I was 3 years old, and from the moment she arrived, she became the sun our family orbited around. She had a magnetic personality, even as a toddler. With her perfect blonde curls and infectious giggle, she charmed everyone she met. I was the opposite, serious, studious, with straight brown hair and a preference for books over social gatherings. Natalie, why can't you be more like your sister, became the soundtrack of my childhood. When I brought home straight A's, Mom would nod distractedly, saying, "That's nice, dear." But when Amber got a B+, they'd celebrate with dinner at her favorite restaurant. For my 16th birthday, I received practical gifts, a planner, gift cards for school supplies, and new sneakers. When Amber turned 16 2 years later, they threw an extravagant party with a hired DJ and catering, even gifting her a brand new car with a custom paint job. I learned early to expect less. I tucked away my disappointment and focused on excelling academically, hoping that someday my achievements would be enough to make them proud. During my sophomore year of college, I was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. The condition wasn't immediately life-threatening but required regular monitoring and occasionally caused severe fatigue and anemia. When I called home to share the diagnosis, Mom said, "Honey, I'm sure it's not as serious as the doctors are making it sound. You've always been sensitive." Dad's response was even more dismissive, "Your mother's right. Medical schools teach doctors to exaggerate everything these days. Just take some vitamins." They never bothered to learn about my condition or ask about my treatments. At family gatherings, if I mentioned feeling unwell, Mom would roll her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. "Natalie's being dramatic again," she'd whisper to whoever was nearby. Despite their indifference, I excelled in my studies. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in molecular biology and secured a position at a prestigious research laboratory in Boston. My work focused on developing new treatments for blood disorders, partly inspired by my own condition. At my graduation, my parents attended but spent most of the ceremony on their phones, coordinating details for Amber's upcoming study abroad trip to Paris. They left immediately after the ceremony, missing the departmental honors reception where I received a special award for my research. "Sorry, sweetie," Mom explained as they hurried out. "We promised Amber we'd video chat with her about her apartment in Paris. You understand?" I did understand. I understood perfectly what my place was in our family. Meanwhile, Amber dropped out of college after 2 years to find herself. She bounced between various careers, interior design, fashion merchandising, event planning, never sticking with anything long enough to build expertise. Yet each new venture was celebrated and generously funded by our parents. 3 years ago, after a luxury volunteer trip to Guatemala that lasted all of 2 weeks, Amber decided to start a charity foundation called Bright Futures, ostensibly to provide educational opportunities for underprivileged children. In reality, it was more of a social networking vehicle than an effective nonprofit. My parents bankrolled the entire operation, including Amber's substantial administrative salary and the designer office space in downtown Boston. The foundation hosted lavish fundraising events where Boston's elite gathered to sip champagne and feel good about themselves while writing tax-deductible checks. Very little money actually made it to any educational programs, but no one seemed to care as long as the parties were spectacular. Despite everything, I maintained a relationship with my family. I attended Sunday dinners when invited, sent thoughtful birthday gifts, and made appearances at Amber's charity events. I'd long ago accepted my role as the background daughter, the reliable one who required little attention or investment. That spring, Amber was planning the biggest event yet for her foundation, a black tie gala at the Boston Harbor Hotel with tickets priced at $500 per plate. For weeks, it was all my parents talked about. Mom was on the decorating committee, and Dad had leveraged his business connections to secure corporate sponsorships. "This gala will put bright futures on the map," Mom gushed during one of our rare phone conversations. "The governor might even attend." Can you imagine? I couldn't imagine caring that much about impressing strangers, but I simply said, "That sounds wonderful. I'm sure it will be a success." "You are coming, aren't you?" she asked, almost as an afterthought. Of course, I replied automatically, though the thought of spending an evening watching my sister bask in adoration while I stood awkwardly in a corner held little appeal. Little did I know that I would never make it to that gala, and neither would my family, though for entirely different reasons. The morning of the gala started like any other workday. I arrived at the lab by 7:30, already feeling more tired than usual. I'd been experiencing increased fatigue for several days but attributed it to working overtime on a time-sensitive research project. By noon, I could barely keep my eyes open. My colleague Stephanie noticed me swaying slightly as I stood at my workstation. "Nat, are you okay? You look really pale," she said, placing a steadying hand on my arm. "I'm fine, just tired," I insisted, though the room had started to tilt oddly around me. Stephanie, who knew about my blood disorder, wasn't convinced. "When was your last blood test?" "About 3 weeks ago," I admitted. The numbers were a little off, but nothing serious. "That's it," she declared. "I'm taking you to urgent care right now." I tried to protest, but when I stood up, black spots danced across my vision. I felt a warm trickle down my leg and looked down to see blood soaking through my lab coat. I hadn't even realized I'd started my period. Except this was far too much blood to be normal. "Oh God," Stephanie gasped. "We need an ambulance." Things moved quickly after that. The paramedics arrived within minutes. My blood pressure was dangerously low, and they started in 4 immediately. As they wheeled me out, I remembered the gala was that evening. "My phone," I mumbled to Stephanie. "Can you grab my phone?" In the ambulance, I called my parents. The call went straight to voicemail. "Mom, Dad, I'm being taken to Boston Memorial. Something's wrong. It might be related to my blood condition. Please call me back." I texted them too, being rushed to hospital. Doctors concerned. Please call. 20 minutes later, as I was being examined in the emergency room, I received a brief text from Mom, "Hope it's nothing serious. We're busy with final preparations for Amber's gala. Keep us posted." The ER doctor ordered immediate blood work and an ultrasound. When the results came back, his expression turned grave. "Miss Adams, your blood counts are critically low, and the ultrasound shows internal bleeding. We need to get you into surgery right away to find and stop the source of the bleeding." "How serious is it?" I asked, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "I won't sugarcoat this. It's very serious. We've called for the surgical team, and they're preparing an operating room now. Do you have family you'd like us to contact?" I tried my parents again. This time, Dad picked up. "Natalie, can this wait? We're in the middle of the setup for the gala," he said, with sounds of bustling activity in the background. "Dad, I'm going into emergency surgery. The doctors say it's serious." "I'm really scared," I said, my voice breaking. There was a pause. "Surgery for what exactly?" "Internal bleeding. They don't know what's causing it yet." "Is this related to that condition you claim to have?" "You know, your mother and I think you might be exaggerating its severity for attention." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, I'm not exaggerating. The doctor says it's life-threatening. Well, doctors always say that to cover themselves legally, he replied dismissively. Look, we can't leave now. Everything would fall apart without us here. Amber needs our support tonight. I'm sure the doctors will take good care of you, and we'll try to stop by tomorrow morning. The call ended, and I lay there in shock. Even now, when doctors were rushing around preparing me for emergency surgery, my parents couldn't be bothered to show up. A nurse named Yvonne came in to prep me for surgery. She must have seen the tears streaming down my face. Is there someone else we should call for you, honey? She asked gently. No, I whispered. There's no one else. Stephanie had gone to move my car from the lab parking lot but promised to return soon. Other than her, I had no close friends in Boston. I'd been so focused on my career and trying to win my parents' approval that I'd neglected to build meaningful relationships outside of work. As my condition deteriorated, the medical team worked with increasing urgency. An anesthesiologist explained the procedure while nurses attached monitoring equipment to my body. I felt cold and increasingly distant from what was happening around me. In a final desperate attempt, I called my sister. Amber, I'm at Boston Memorial Hospital. I'm about to go into emergency surgery for internal bleeding. The doctors say it's really serious. Please tell Mom and Dad. I need someone here. Oh my God, Natalie. Tonight of all nights? Amber sounded more annoyed than concerned. You know how important this gala is. There's no way any of us can leave now. Hundreds of people are about to arrive. Amber, I could die, I said plainly. Don't be so dramatic. You always do this, create some crisis whenever attention is on me. I've got to go. The caterers need me. The call ended, and with it, any illusion I had about my place in my family's priorities. The surgical team arrived, and the anesthesiologist prepared to put me under. Yvonne held my hand as tears silently rolled down my cheeks. We're going to take good care of you, she promised. I'll be here when you wake up. As consciousness slipped away, my last thought was wondering if my family would even notice if I never woke up at all. I became aware of the steady beeping of monitors first. Then came the pain, a deep throbbing ache throughout my abdomen. My throat felt raw, and my mouth was desert dry. I tried to open my eyes, but they seemed weighted down. Natalie, can you hear me? You're in recovery. I recognized Yvonne's voice and forced my eyes open. The fluorescent lights above were blindingly bright. Water, I croaked. She held a small cup with a straw to my lips. Just small sips for now. After moistening my mouth, I managed to ask, what happened? A doctor I hadn't seen before stepped into view. Miss Adams, I'm Dr. Patel. I performed your surgery. You had a severe internal hemorrhage caused by a ruptured blood vessel in your abdomen, likely a complication of your underlying blood disorder. We had to transfuse 8 units of blood during the procedure. 8 units, I whispered, knowing enough about medicine to understand how significant that was. Yes, she continued. We actually lost you twice on the table. Your heart stopped, and we had to resuscitate you. Her expression was serious but kind. It was touch and go for a while, but you pulled through. You're a fighter. I died twice, I said, the information seeming too enormous to process. How long was I in surgery? Almost 7 hours, Dr. Patel replied. It's now just past midnight. 7 hours? The gala would be over by now. Has my family been here? Yvonne and Dr. Patel exchanged a glance. We tried calling the emergency contacts in your file multiple times, Yvonne said gently. We left several messages explaining the severity of your condition. No one came, I stated flatly. It wasn't a question. I'm sorry, no, Dr. Patel confirmed. Your colleague Stephanie was here for several hours, but we sent her home to rest once you were stable. She said she'll be back in the morning. I nodded, a strange numbness spreading through me that had nothing to do with the pain medication flowing through my fore. You should rest now, Dr. Patel advised. Your body has been through an extreme trauma. We'll continue monitoring you closely in the ICU for the next 24 to 48 hours. After they left, I lay in the dimly lit recovery room, the reality of what had happened slowly sinking in. I had nearly died, had actually died, technically, twice, and not one member of my family had bothered to show up. I asked a nurse for my phone, which Stephanie had made sure stayed with my personal belongings. There were no missed calls from my parents or Amber, just a text from Mom sent around 9 p.m. Gala is a tremendous success. Governor showed up with his entire staff. Amber's speech brought everyone to tears. Hope you're feeling better. With shaking hands, I opened Instagram. The first posts in my feed were from my mother, father, and sister, dozens of photos from the gala. Elegant decorations, famous attendees, Amber in her designer gown accepting applause at the podium. One photo in particular caught my eye, my parents raising champagne glasses in a toast, laughing joyously. The timestamp showed it was posted at 8:32 p.m., right around the time Dr. Patel was restarting my heart. The caption read, "Perfect night celebrating our amazing daughter. Proud parents. Bright Futures Gala." I scrolled through more photos, a surreal feeling washing over me. While I fought for my life, my family was posing for pictures, accepting congratulations, and enjoying a 5-course gourmet dinner. Not once, apparently, did they check their phones or wonder how their other daughter was doing. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling, too emotionally numb even for tears. The next morning, I was moved to the ICU. Stephanie arrived early, bringing toiletries and a change of clothes for when I'd be allowed to wear them. "Your parents are the worst people I've ever heard of," she declared after I told her what had happened. How could they not come? I had no answer for her. The question had circled in my mind all night. Around noon, my parents finally appeared. They were dressed casually but expensively, looking refreshed and well-rested. Mom carried a small bouquet of flowers from the grocery store. "Natalie, darling, you gave us quite a scare," she said, air-kissing near my cheek to avoid disturbing the various tubes attached to me. "Did I?" I asked flatly. "Of course," she said. "When we got all those messages from the hospital this morning, we came right over." This morning? Not last night when I was actually dying? "The gala ran so late, and we were absolutely exhausted," Dad explained, checking his watch subtly. "We turned our phones off to get some uninterrupted sleep. You know how it is." "No, I don't know how it is to ignore emergency calls while my daughter is dying," I replied, my voice steady. Mom's smile faltered. "Dying? Don't be so dramatic, Natalie. You're always exaggerating these things." "I died on the operating table," I said. "Twice. They had to resuscitate me. 8 units of blood, 7-hour surgery." Does that sound like an exaggeration? They looked uncomfortable but not particularly remorseful. "Well, you're fine now, aren't you?" Dad said briskly. "That's what matters." "Why are you even here?" I asked suddenly. "Don't you have some post-gala brunch to attend?" "Natalie." Mom looked scandalized. "We're your parents. Of course, we came to see you." "After making sure you got a full night's sleep and had breakfast," I pointed out, "after making sure it wouldn't inconvenience you too much." "You're being unfair," Dad said sternly. "We're very busy people. We came as soon as we reasonably could, 25 hours after I was admitted with a life-threatening emergency," I said. "Tell me, if it had been Amber in this bed, would you have waited until it was convenient to show up?" They didn't answer, which was answer enough. Mom changed the subject. "The gala was a tremendous success. The governor stayed for nearly an hour, and 3 different news outlets covered it. Amber raised over $100,000. I closed my eyes. "I'm very tired now. I think you should go." "We just got here," Dad protested. "And I appreciate the 10 minutes you've managed to spare me. But as you can see, I'm fine now. No need to waste more of your valuable time." They left shortly after, promising to check in by phone later. They never called. The next day, Amber finally showed up, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and carrying a takeout coffee. "Sorry I couldn't come sooner," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "The post-gala wrap-up has been insane. The media coverage is amazing, though." She spent the next 20 minutes showing me photos and videos from the event, barely asking about my condition. When she did finally inquire how I was feeling, she immediately cut off my answer to tell me about a minor celebrity who had unexpectedly attended the gala. "Oh, I almost forgot," she said as she was leaving. "Mom and Dad can't visit today. They're hosting a thank you lunch for the gala committee." I nodded, unsurprised. Of course they are. After she left, I lay in my hospital bed, thinking about the past 36 hours. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The desperate need for my parents' approval, the constant hope that someday they would see me and value me as much as they did Amber, it was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. I had nearly died alone because my family couldn't be bothered to answer their phones. The truth was stark and undeniable: I was not a priority to them. I never had been and never would be. As I lay there listening to the steady beep of my heart monitor, the heart that had stopped twice and been forced to beat again, I made a decision. I would no longer chase their love or approval. I would no longer pretend we were a normal family with normal relationships. From this moment forward, I would systematically remove them from my life, not with dramatic confrontations or tearful accusations, but quietly and completely. They would barely notice I was gone until it was too late to fix what they had broken. And when they finally realized what they had lost, I would be long past caring. I remained in the hospital for another week. My parents visited twice more, each time for less than 30 minutes. They brought expensive but impersonal gifts: a silk robe I would never wear in a hospital, gourmet chocolates I couldn't eat while on medication. Their visits felt like obligations to be checked off a list rather than genuine concern for my well-being. The nursing staff noticed. Yvonne, who had become something of a guardian angel during my stay, didn't bother hiding her disapproval. "Your colleague Stephanie has been here every day, sometimes twice," she commented after my parents left on their third brief visit. "She brings you things you actually need and sits with you for hours. Your parents, on the other hand." She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what she meant. One afternoon, I overheard my parents talking in the hallway outside my room. They hadn't realized the door was partially open. "I can't stay for another hour," my father was saying irritably. "I have that meeting with the foundation's accountant." "Well, I can't stay either," my mother replied. "I promised Amber I'd help her sort through the gala photos for the press release. She's an adult, Eleanor. She doesn't need us hovering. Amber's fundraiser needs our attention right now. This is a crucial time for the foundation's public image." I know. We'll just pop in for 10 minutes, ask how she's feeling, and then head out. She probably wants to rest anyway." They entered my room with bright, false smiles, stayed exactly 12 minutes by the clock on the wall, and left with promises to visit again soon. They didn't return before I was discharged. Stephanie was the one who drove me home from the hospital. She helped me up the stairs to my apartment, set up my medications on the kitchen counter, and stocked my refrigerator with easy-to-prepare meals. "I can stay with you tonight if you want," she offered. "The doctor said you shouldn't be alone for the first 48 hours. "That's really kind, but I'll be okay," I assured her. "My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, said she'd check on me, and I have all the emergency numbers." The truth was, I needed to be alone to process everything and plan my next steps. After Stephanie left, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and began to list everything I would need to do. My near-death experience had clarified what I wanted: complete independence from my family, not just emotionally, but practically, legally, and financially. First, I would need a new place to live. My parents didn't have a key to my current apartment, but they knew the address and could show up unannounced. I needed a place they had no knowledge of. Second, financial separation. Though I was financially independent in terms of income, there were still connections that needed to be severed. My parents were co-signers on my oldest credit card, were listed on my bank account as emergency contacts, and were the beneficiaries of my life insurance policy. Third, medical autonomy. They were still listed as my medical proxies and emergency contacts at both my doctor's office and now the hospital. That needed to change immediately. Fourth, I needed a support system that didn't include them. Stephanie was a start, but I needed more connections, more people who actually cared about my well-being. I spent that evening making calls and sending emails, setting my plan in motion. I contacted a real estate agent about finding a new apartment. I called my bank about removing my parents from my accounts. I emailed my HR department about changing my emergency contact information and life insurance beneficiaries. During my 2 weeks of medical leave, I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood. It was smaller than my current place but in a secure building with a doorman, an added layer of protection against unwanted visitors. I began quietly moving my possessions a little at a time, using a moving service Stephanie recommended. I told no one in my family about the move. As far as they knew, I was still recovering at my old address. I also found a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Dr. Winters listened without judgment as I detailed my family's behavior and my decision to distance myself. "What you're describing sounds like a pattern of emotional neglect," she said during our second session. "Your medical emergency simply brought it into sharp focus." "I feel guilty sometimes," I admitted, "like I'm overreacting or being vindictive." "Natalie, setting boundaries isn't vindictive. It's self-preservation. You nearly died alone because your family couldn't be bothered to answer their phones during a life-or-death emergency. That's not a small thing. They don't see it that way. They think I'm being dramatic. Their inability to acknowledge the harm they've caused doesn't invalidate your experience," Dr. Winters said firmly. "You're not cutting them off in a fit of anger. You're making a deliberate choice to protect yourself from further harm." Those sessions became a lifeline as I navigated the emotional turbulence of my decision. There were moments of doubt, moments when ingrained family loyalty made me question whether I was doing the right thing. Dr. Winters helped me recognize those moments as the result of years of conditioning to put my family's needs above my own. By the time I returned to work, I had moved into my new apartment, changed all my emergency contacts, removed my parents from my financial accounts, and updated my will. I had told no one in my family about any of these changes. My mother called once during this period, not to check on my recovery, but to ask if I would attend a thank you dinner for major donors to Amber's foundation. "I'm not feeling up to social events yet," I told her truthfully. "The doctors want me to take it easy for at least another month." "It's just dinner, Natalie," she said impatiently. "Surely you can sit at a table for a few hours. These donors specifically asked about you. They heard you were ill and want to see that you're all right." "They heard I was ill? What exactly did you tell them?" There was a slight pause. "Just that you had a minor medical procedure and couldn't attend the gala." "A minor medical procedure?" Not that I had nearly died from internal bleeding. Not that my heart had stopped twice on the operating table. "I won't be attending," I said firmly. "Send my regrets." "Natalie, this is important to your sister. Can't you think about someone besides yourself for once?" The irony was so thick, I almost laughed. "Goodbye, Mom. I have to go." I hung up and blocked her number. It was the first overtly hostile action I had taken, but it felt right. I wasn't ready to deal with her manipulation. That night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset over a city skyline my parents would never see from this vantage point. The ache in my chest wasn't just from surgical healing anymore. It was grief for the family I had always wanted but never had, grief for the years spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. But beneath the grief was something new, a quiet determination. I would build a life that didn't revolve around trying to please people who couldn't be pleased. I would find connections with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them or how I reflected on them. I was done bleeding for people who wouldn't even notice I was hurt. Over the next 6 months, I methodically continued my plan of separation. I did it gradually, giving my family plenty of opportunities to notice what was happening and perhaps try to address it. They never did. 2 months after my surgery, I was offered a research position at a prestigious medical center in Chicago. The timing couldn't have been better. It was a significant career advancement, but more importantly, it would put physical distance between me and my family. I accepted immediately. When the paperwork was finalized, I waited until just 1 week before my planned move to inform my parents. Chicago, my father repeated when I told him over the phone. Why would you want to move there? It's an excellent opportunity, I explained. They're doing groundbreaking research on blood disorders. But your life is here in Boston. Your family is here. I almost asked where that family concern had been when I was dying in the hospital, but I kept my voice neutral. It's a great career move. I start in 10 days. 10 days? And you're just telling us now? I've been busy with preparations, I said vaguely. There was a pause. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order then. Your mother will be disappointed you're moving so far away. Would she? I doubted it. Thanks, Dad. I should go. I have a lot of packing to do. Of course. Let us know if you need any help. I wouldn't. And we both knew it. The call ended without any real emotion on either side. My mother's reaction was similarly tepid. Chicago. Well, I suppose that's nice for your career. Will you be back for Thanksgiving? Amber's hosting at her new condo. I don't think so. I'll still be settling in, and I probably can't get the time off so soon after starting. Christmas, then. You must come home for Christmas. We'll see, I said noncommittally. I really can't make plans that far ahead right now. My sister's response came via text. Mom says you're moving to Chicago. WTF, Nat? Why so far? Who's going to help me with the spring fundraiser? I didn't bother responding. None of them offered to help me move. None of them asked for my new address. None of them seemed particularly sad to see me go. It only confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't essential to their lives. I moved to Chicago in early October. My new apartment was in a high-rise with stunning views of Lake Michigan. I threw myself into my new job, which was challenging and rewarding in ways my previous position hadn't been. I was working with patients directly now, not just in the lab, helping people with conditions similar to mine. Stephanie and I kept in touch with weekly video calls. She had become a true friend, someone who checked in regularly and genuinely cared about my well-being. Through her, I occasionally heard news about my family, though I never asked for it. Your sister's foundation was featured in some society magazine, she told me during one call. There was a photo of your parents at some black tie event. They looked like they were having a grand old time. I'm sure they were, I said, unsurprised. How's the lab? I deflected any conversation about my family, and eventually, Stephanie stopped bringing them up. I made new friends in Chicago. My colleague Daniel invited me to his book club, where I met a diverse group of people who shared my love of reading. My neighbor Jasmine introduced me to her hiking group, and soon I was spending weekends exploring forest preserves around the city. I continued seeing a therapist, finding a new one in Chicago who helped me work through my feelings about my family and develop healthier relationship patterns. Slowly, I built a network of people who valued me simply for being me. Meanwhile, my contact with my family dwindled to almost nothing. I didn't call them, and they rarely called me. When they did, our conversations were brief and superficial. I sent birthday cards with gift cards enclosed, impersonal, but acceptable. I replied to texts with short, uninformative responses that discouraged further inquiry. How's Chicago? Fine. Work is busy. Are you dating anyone? No. Focusing on career. When are you visiting? Not sure. Schedule is tight. As Thanksgiving approached, my mother called to make one last attempt at guilting me into coming home for the holiday. Amber's prepared a place for you. She's going to all this trouble, and you can't make time for your family. I told you months ago I wouldn't be able to make it, I replied evenly. I have to work the day before and after. This was true. I had volunteered for the shift specifically to have a valid excuse. You could fly in just for the day. That doesn't make sense logistically or financially, Mom. I'm sorry, but I can't make it this year. Fine, she huffed. We'll miss you. Would they? I doubted they would notice my empty chair amid the social posturing and photo opportunities that their holiday gatherings had become. Instead of going to Boston, I accepted Stephanie's invitation to join her family in Michigan. Her parents welcomed me warmly, and her siblings treated me like one of their own. We played board games, helped cook the meal together, and shared stories around the fireplace afterward. It was the most genuine family holiday I had experienced in years. As Christmas approached, I used the same excuse, work commitments, to avoid returning to Boston. This time, there was less pressure from my mother, as if she had already accepted my absence as the new normal. I spent Christmas Eve at a dinner hosted by my book club and Christmas Day volunteering at a local hospital, bringing small gifts to patients who couldn't be home for the holidays. In the evening, I attended a small gathering at Daniel's apartment with other holiday orphans, people who, for various reasons, weren't with their biological families. It should have felt lonely, this first holiday season away from my family. Instead, it felt liberating. I wasn't anxiously trying to measure up to impossible standards or sitting awkwardly at family gatherings where I felt more like an afterthought than a beloved daughter and sister. In January, my father called with a surprising request. Your mother and I are considering a trip to Chicago for a weekend. Perhaps we could see your new place, have dinner. It was the first time they had expressed any interest in my new life. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they had finally noticed my withdrawal and wanted to reconnect. Then reality reasserted itself. What brings you to Chicago? I asked. Oh, there's an investment opportunity I'm looking into, and your mother has always wanted to see the Art Institute. Of course, they weren't coming to see me. I was just an add-on to a trip they were already planning. I'm pretty busy these days, I said vaguely. But let me know when you have firm dates, and I'll see what I can do. They never mentioned the trip again. In February, I agreed to one final dinner with my family before completing my separation. I flew to Boston for a weekend, ostensibly to collect some remaining items from storage, but really to say goodbye in my own way. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, neutral territory. My parents arrived 10 minutes late, and Amber 15 minutes after that. They all looked exactly the same, as if the past 8 months had changed nothing for them. Perhaps it hadn't. Natalie, you look different, my mother said, studying me across the table. Have you lost weight? I had, in fact, gained 5 pounds of healthy muscle from regular workouts with my hiking group. No, just a different hairstyle. The dinner conversation revolved around Amber's foundation, my parents' social engagements, and gossip about people I barely remembered from their circle. Not once did they ask meaningful questions about my life in Chicago, my work, or my new friends. I sat there observing them with a strange detachment. These people who shared my DNA felt like strangers. Or perhaps they had always been strangers, and I was only now acknowledging it. When the check came, my father paid it with a flourish, as if the gesture somehow made up for everything else. We should do this more often, my mother said as we prepared to leave. It's not right that we only see you once in 8 months. Yes, I agreed mildly. It's not right at all. They didn't catch the double meaning in my words. I hugged each of them goodbye, knowing it would be the last time I initiated physical contact with them, not because I hated them, but because I had finally accepted that the loving family I had always wanted existed only in my imagination. Safe travels back to Chicago, my father said. Take care of yourself, my mother added. Don't be such a stranger, Amber called as she walked to her car. I nodded and smiled, making no promises. They didn't notice. On the flight back to Chicago, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The grief was for what could have been, the family relationships I had always wanted but never had. The relief was for finally stopping the exhausting pretense that we were a normal, loving family. I had quietly erased myself from their lives, and they had barely noticed. The realization hurt, but it also confirmed that my decision was the right one. Back in Chicago, I completed the final steps of my separation plan. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to people I trusted. I created new email accounts and social media profiles, abandoning the ones my family could access. I set up mail forwarding to ensure nothing important was sent to my old addresses. I didn't announce these changes to my family. I simply disappeared from the channels they were used to using, becoming gradually unreachable. If they really wanted to find me, they could, but they would have to make an effort. Based on our history, I didn't expect them to try very hard. Almost exactly 1 year after my own medical emergency, I was in a research meeting when my phone began buzzing repeatedly in my pocket. I ignored it, focusing on the presentation about a promising new treatment protocol. When the meeting ended 2 hours later, I checked my phone to find 15 missed calls and multiple text messages from my mother and sister. The first text from my mother read, "Natalie, call immediately. Your father has had a heart attack. We're at Boston Memorial." Subsequent messages became increasingly desperate. "Where are you? Dad's in surgery. This is serious. He collapsed during his morning meeting. They're doing bypass surgery. Natalie, please call. We need you here." The final message, sent just 30 minutes ago, "Your father is out of surgery. Critical but stable. Where are you? We need you to come home now." I stood in the hallway, staring at my phone, a complex mixture of emotions washing over me. Concern for my father, certainly, but also a deep sense of irony. They were at the same hospital where I had nearly died while they attended a gala. Now, they expected me to drop everything and rush to their side. I walked slowly to my office, closed the door, and sat down to think. This wasn't about revenge. I wasn't refusing to go because they had refused to come when I needed them. This was about the pattern of behavior that had defined our relationship for decades. If I dropped everything and flew to Boston now, what would it prove? That they could ignore me until they needed me? That despite everything, I would still come running when called? That their emergencies deserved immediate response while mine could be scheduled around their convenience? I wasn't trying to punish them. I was protecting myself from falling back into old patterns. After careful consideration, I composed a text to my mother. "I'm sorry to hear about Dad. I hope he recovers quickly. I have commitments I can't break. Keep me updated on his condition." Her response was immediate and incredulous. "Are you serious? Your father could die. Whatever commitments you have can't possibly be more important than family." I stared at the word family for a long moment. Family. The same family that had been too busy to answer the phone when I was dying. The same family that had barely noticed when I moved hundreds of miles away. The same family that couldn't be bothered to ask meaningful questions about my life during our rare interactions. I typed a simple response: "I learned what family means from you." Then I turned off my phone. The next morning, I ordered a modest flower arrangement to be sent to my father's hospital room with a card that read simply, "Wishing you a speedy recovery, Natalie." When I turned my phone back on, there were more missed calls and angry text messages, now including several from Amber. "I can't believe you're doing this. Dad could die, and you're acting like it's nothing. What kind of person are you becoming? The kind who values herself enough not to run to people who never ran to her." I didn't reply to the messages. Instead, I called the hospital directly and spoke to a nurse on my father's floor, identifying myself as his daughter and asking for an update on his condition. The nurse informed me that he was recovering well from the triple bypass surgery and was expected to make a full recovery with proper care and lifestyle changes. I thanked her and hung up, relieved that he was out of danger, but firm in my decision not to go to Boston. 3 days later, my mother left a voicemail on my work phone, which I hadn't changed. "Your father is being discharged tomorrow. He's asked about you repeatedly. I don't understand how you can be so cold. This isn't the daughter we raised. When you're ready to explain your behavior and apologize, we'll be waiting." I deleted the message without responding. A week passed, then 2. The angry messages gradually gave way to confused ones, then hurt ones, and finally contemplative ones. "Natalie, I've been thinking about what you said about learning what family means from us. What did you mean by that? Call me when you can. And then, most surprisingly, from my father, Natalie, it's Dad. My heart attack has given me time to reflect on many things, including our relationship. I sense that something is deeply wrong between us. I would like to understand what's happened. Please call when you're ready. I didn't call, but I did send a brief email. I'm glad you're recovering well. I'm not ready for a phone conversation, but I will say this. When I was hemorrhaging internally and coding on an operating table last year, you and Mom were at Amber's Gala, having turned off your phones because you didn't want to be disturbed. That taught me everything I needed to know about my place in this family. I wish you well, but I need to protect myself from further disappointment. My father's response came the next day. I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. At the time, we didn't understand the severity of your condition. We thought you were exaggerating, as we believed you often did about your health. I see now how wrong we were. Would you consider family therapy? We want to make this right. I read the email several times. There was an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but also a qualification. They didn't understand, they thought I was exaggerating. Even in an apology, they couldn't fully own their behavior. I replied simply, I'm not interested in family therapy at this time. I need space to heal on my own terms. They respected my wishes, at least temporarily. The messages became less frequent, though they didn't stop entirely. My mother sent updates about my father's recovery. Amber occasionally sent links to articles she thought might interest me professionally, small, tentative attempts to maintain some connection. I responded politely but briefly, giving away nothing of substance about my life or feelings. I wasn't being cruel. I was being cautious. Years of emotional neglect couldn't be erased by a health scare and a few apologetic messages. 3 months after my father's heart attack, my mother called my work number again. Natalie, we've been talking a lot, your father, Amber, and I, about you, about how we've treated you over the years. Her voice sounded different, humbler perhaps. We didn't see it before, how we always put Amber first, how we dismissed your medical condition, how we weren't there when you needed us most. I remained silent, listening. Your father's heart attack made us realize we could lose you, that we might have already lost you in ways that matter most. We'd like to try to make amends if you'll let us. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, my voice neutral. We'd like to visit you in Chicago, see where you live, where you work, get to know your life there. No expectations, just a chance to start understanding who you are now. I considered the request carefully. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, but another part, the part that had been working through my feelings in therapy for over a year, recognized this as a potentially important step in my own healing process. I'll think about it, I said finally. I'll let you know. After discussing it with my therapist, I agreed to a meeting, but on my terms, not at my apartment, which was my sanctuary, but at a neutral restaurant, not for an extended visit, but for a single meal, a controlled environment where I could leave if necessary. I wasn't ready to let them back into my life, but I was ready to hear what they had to say. 2 years after my near-death experience in that Boston hospital, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. Chicago had become truly home, a place where I had built a life centered around my own needs and values rather than around seeking approval that never came. My research was thriving. I had published 2 significant papers on treatment protocols for rare blood disorders and was leading a clinical trial that showed promising results. My own condition was well managed with a treatment regimen I had helped develop. My social circle had expanded beyond my initial connections. The book club had introduced me to Maria, now my closest friend, who shared my love of scientific mysteries and quiet Sunday mornings. Daniel from work had become both a valued colleague and a regular hiking companion. Jasmine and her husband often invited me to their family gatherings, where I was treated as an honorary aunt to their 2 young children. I had even started dating someone, Michael, a pediatric oncologist I met at a medical conference. Our relationship was still new, but it was built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives and work. Through therapy, I had processed much of my grief over my family relationships. I no longer woke up with that hollow ache in my chest or felt the sharp sting of rejection when I saw happy families together. I had accepted that while my biological family might never be what I needed them to be, I could create connections that fulfilled those needs. My contact with my parents and sister had settled into a predictable pattern: occasional emails, brief phone calls on major holidays, impersonal gifts exchanged on birthdays. I maintained these minimal connections not out of obligation, but as part of my healing process. Complete severance wasn't necessary. What mattered was that I controlled the terms of our interaction. Then came the surprise visit request from my parents. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet them at a lakefront restaurant I liked but didn't frequent regularly, a place with no emotional significance to me. They arrived 10 minutes early, looking nervous and out of place, a stark contrast to their usual confident demeanor in social situations. My mother had aged visibly in the 2 years since I'd seen her. My father, still recovering from his heart attack, moved more slowly than I remembered. "Natalie," my mother said, stepping forward as if to hug me, then stopping herself when she saw my body language. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." We sat at a table overlooking Lake Michigan, an awkward silence settling over us until our drink orders arrived. "Your city is beautiful," my father said, gesturing toward the lake. "I can see why you like it here." "Yes," I agreed. "It suits me." "We've missed you," my mother said abruptly. "More than I think we realized we would." I nodded but didn't reciprocate the sentiment. "Why are you here?" "Really?" They exchanged glances. My father cleared his throat. "When I had my heart attack," he began slowly, "and you didn't come, it forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we had treated you, about what we had taught you about family through our actions. We were wrong," my mother said, her voice breaking slightly. "The way we prioritized Amber, the way we dismissed your health concerns, the way we weren't there when you nearly died, we were wrong, and we're deeply sorry. We don't expect forgiveness," my father added. "We just want you to know that we understand now what we did, and we'd like a chance to do better if you're willing to give us that opportunity." I studied them carefully, looking for signs of the old patterns, the subtle dismissiveness, the impatience, the performative concern that masked true indifference. I didn't see those things. What I saw were two people confronting the consequences of their choices and finding them painful. "I appreciate your apology," I said finally. "But you need to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't organize my life around trying to earn your attention. If we're going to have any relationship going forward, it will be on different terms." "What terms?" my mother asked. "Honesty, respect for my boundaries, acceptance that I have a full life here that doesn't include you in every aspect, and most importantly, no expectations that I'll drop everything when you decide you want my attention the way you expect Amber to do." They nodded, surprisingly receptive. "We can accept those terms," my father said. "We just want a chance to know you again, the real you, not the version of you we thought we knew." We talked for nearly 3 hours. They asked questions about my work, my friends, my life in Chicago, questions they had never bothered to ask before. I answered honestly but maintained emotional distance. This wasn't a reconciliation. It was a negotiation of new boundaries. When we parted, there were no tearful hugs or dramatic declarations of renewed family bonds, just a cautious acknowledgement that perhaps, with time and effort, we might develop a healthier relationship. My relationship with Amber evolved separately from my relationship with my parents. A month after their visit, she called me directly, something she rarely did. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said without preamble. "About how I never really saw what was happening with you, how I was so caught up in being the favorite that I didn't notice the cost to you." "It wasn't your responsibility to notice," I told her. "You were a child, too." "But I'm not a child anymore," she countered. "And I've been pretty self-centered as an adult, too. I want to do better. I want to actually be your sister, not just someone who happens to share your parents." It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard her say. We began having monthly video calls, awkward at first, but gradually becoming more genuine. She even came to visit me in Chicago alone and made a real effort to understand my life there. My healing journey continued with and without my family. I joined a support group for people who had experienced family estrangement, finding comfort in shared stories and strategies. I continued therapy, working through the complex emotions that surfaced as my family dynamics shifted. I built what my therapist called a chosen family, people connected by love and mutual respect rather than DNA. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenges, and shared life's joys. I maintained careful boundaries with my parents and sister. Our relationship was limited, but more honest than it had ever been. They were now a small part of my life rather than its defining factor, and that felt right. The day I nearly bled out on that operating table, something inside me permanently changed. I learned that sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones least capable of it. But I also learned that I am enough on my own terms. My worth isn't measured by their approval, and my life is richer now that I've stopped chasing it. Sometimes, the truest form of self-love is knowing when to walk away.